Chapter 598. A ferocious flame-bellied monitor lizard was half lying on the ground. Even so, it was still as tall as a person. Below its belly was the slowly flowing lava. Not only did the lava of nearly 1,000 degrees not destroy its limbs, but it also provided it with the energy to persist. This was a very suitable battlefield for the flame-bellied monitor lizard. As far as the eye could see, dark red lava could be seen everywhere. Some of it flowed down the hill and some simply gushed out between the heavily cracked ground. Although it was not as powerful as an explosive eruption, the scene of the earth cracking everywhere, as if it could completely collapse at any time, was equally thrilling. In a similar environment, the flame-bellied monitor lizard had killed countless invaders, and its total size could even fill the crater behind it. Almost all of its prey could not resist the fire poison it sprayed, and it could not resist the destructive lava it controlled. But at this moment, before it could cause any fatal damage to the metal creation in front of it, its tail and one of its forelimbs had been cut off, and it had lost most of its mobility. The lava fire intertwined with the gray skylight, but it was difficult to illuminate the specially treated armor coating, as if there was always a blurry dark domain. This grayish-black metal creation was only about 20 meters away from it. In the past it could have pounced, but now it could only desperately accumulate strength, use the special abdomen of the mutated evolution to absorb the heat of the lava, and then open its mouth wide. Buzz. The heavy alloy javelin, carrying lightning, entered the mouth of the flame-bellied monitor lizard, and a small part of it penetrated its back. It exploded like a high-explosive bomb, magma splattered everywhere and scales flew everywhere. Immediately, blazing electric flames shot out from the mouth, eye sockets, wounds, and even the cracks in the outer skin of the scale armor. The 2-ton body of the flame-bellied monitor lizard shrank in the blink of an eye. Its special body structure, which had evolved from the mutation, was also completely destroyed by this round of damage. The high temperature of the lava was finally revealed at this moment, and a small part of the body of the giant lizard was swallowed in a breath. However, in the burning flames of the giant lizard, there was still a blood-colored light. Electromagnetic Vanguard 1 silently stepped forward, stepping on the flat head of the flame-bellied monitor lizard, and also on the slowly flowing magma, walking to the top of the hill. The modified body based on the Sergeant X-2 model did not have the ability to resist the lava for a long time. However, when the high-temperature lava tried to devour the metal leg, it was repelled by an invisible force and slowly moved away. Number 1 crossed the line of defense of the giant fire-bellied lizards and set foot on the top of the erupting volcano. Now, the volcanic area that appeared in the optical imaging system was a real volcanic area. Within a radius of several hundred square kilometers, at least 70 to 80% of the craters were emitting thick smoke and lava. Dark red lines of fire crisscrossed the ground, cutting the area into pieces. Luo Nan had actually completed the goal of the first stage after killing the flame-belly monitor lizard. Although the guardians who had retreated under the control of the Vulcan ants had already gathered in the central area and rebuilt the defensive line, most of them were unable to burrow underground and bathe in the lava to enter the core area. Number 1 could do it. Under Luo Nan's control, this combat machine stepped directly into the boiling pool of lava under the protection of a powerful magnetic shield. Of course, it was just passing by. Soon it locked onto a certain gap in the inner wall of the volcano. It blasted apart a chunk of rock that had just been congealed and piled up not too long ago, revealing a narrow crack illuminated by the lava. Emo Luan's civil engineering isn't bad. What should be praised was that Luo Nan was able to utilize the terrain to the greatest limit with his meticulous senses and reconnaissance over the past few days. He was able to open up a subway line to bypass the congestion on the surface. Number 1 was not the only passerby in this narrow passageway. The lava was like a flowing stream beneath its feet, extending even further into the crack. The densely packed Vulcan ants were lined up in rows within the hissing flowing lava. They borrowed the power of the lava to move faster. Their speed was not much slower than a normal person's walking speed. The Vulcan ants did not possess complete individual thinking, but they possessed a powerful group consciousness. Luo Nan could feel the faint evil intent that came from the nothingness, but this squad of Vulcan ants was still restrained by a high degree of discipline. They ignored the damage caused by the stomp of the combat machine and continued to flow back to the core area. The formation of the ant colony had yet to end when a buzzing sound assaulted them from within the dust-filled air. It was as if a swarm of locusts had passed through. A dark red cloud of blood suddenly gushed out from the crevice to the side. There were hundreds of thousands of winged vulcan ants. They did not have the ability to fly long distances, but they were still able to advance forward at a faster speed within this narrow passageway. This speed was just about the same as Number One's advancing speed. Number One was submerged within the cloud of blood as expected. Lava and the cloud of blood extended forward within the long and narrow crevice. There was a certain section in the middle that flickered with electricity and fire irregularly. This was the phenomenon formed by the electromagnetic shield repelling and killing the surrounding vulcan ants. The surroundings were densely packed with flying ants, and their feet were even stepping on the lava. They were just remote-controlled combat machines. They were not here in person. Otherwise, Luonan could not guarantee that he would be able to maintain a calm state of mind. They were both vulcan ants. They crawled within the lava and flew within the crevice, but there was a large difference in their body shape and body structure. But this was not strange in a volcanic area. According to Luonan's reconnaissance over the past 2 days, there were hundreds and thousands of vulcan ant nests within a radius of 200 kilometers. They were widely distributed, and the direction of mutation evolution was a bit different within every nest. And since the lifespan of vulcan ants was short, they replaced each other extremely quickly. Therefore, they were able to rapidly form differences in a short amount of time. This was simply a large-scale laboratory for genetic mutation. The branches of this laboratory in the wilderness had their own areas of activity. They were very territorial and sometimes they would even kill each other. But they all had the same origin. They all belonged to one. The mutant nest. There was a direct relationship of subordination between the headquarters and the branches. Now that headquarters was in trouble, the entire branch had returned to assist. Luonan only had a few short days of observation. He did not know what these vulcan ants would do when they gathered together. But he didn't want to add more variables to his plan, so he controlled Number One to speed up. The frequency of lightning flashing clearly increased within the blood cloud that pervaded the crevice. A series of crackling explosions rang out. Number One's forward speed had already increased by 3 times, and the strength of the electromagnetic shield had increased correspondingly. This was to defend against the underground guardian that could come out at any time. The electromagnetic shield was an advanced technology that had yet to be realized by Earth's technology. It was formed from the integration of the seed imprint that was implanted into the combat machinery. Thus, a powerful electromagnetic field domain was formed with electromagnetic vanguard as the fulcrum. The domain pervaded the surroundings and it could be retracted and released at will. This was the embryonic form of Jin Tong's extraordinary domain. Being able to realize this kind of effect proved that the potential of the seed imprint had been excavated to a new level. And under this stimulation, the corresponding information within the divine binding hoop and the virtual brain system was activated one after another. They provided Luonan with even more detailed and thorough application technology. Of course, the carriers of these application technologies were all indecipherable hieroglyphs. Luonan relied on the even more marvelous I word to decipher a portion of the hieroglyphs with great difficulty. The divine binding hoop was the sole spoil of war from killing Jin Tong. Presumably, it had caused quite a bit of trouble for its previous owner. It had to be said that Jin Tong was truly a genius for being able to break into the extraordinary realm under these circumstances. High-level techniques required high-level consumption. 2,000 kilometers away in the underground laboratory of Gear, Luonan regulated his breathing in the simulation chamber to adapt to the ever-increasing pressure. Currently, the internal energy and transmission system of the electromagnetic Vanguard 1 had already retreated to a secondary position in the driving force. The main source of power came from the remote interference of Luonan's soul strength. Just the electromagnetic shield alone consumed an astronomical amount of energy. In addition, there was also the natural consumption of long-range interference. Even with Luonan's soul strength reserves, it was still quite strenuous. Fortunately, strands of marvelous energy seeped over from the depths of the void as Luonan approached the core region. The energy grew clearer and stronger. Good. Very good. Luonan let out a sigh of relief. This supplement was nothing compared to the overall consumption, but it was an extremely positive feedback. There was no energy in this world that was like water without a source or a tree without roots. There was bound to be a source and a process of transformation. Luo Nan was fully aware of the entire process. His heart was all the more certain and excited. Number one's speed increased once more. Not only was it advancing towards its predetermined target, it was also tracing back to the source of the energy transformation. After advancing another 10 kilometers or so, number one had already swapped out 2 passageways in the ground. One of these passageways was a shortcut that had just been created due to the earthquake. It was precisely because of this timely change that it was able to evade the even crazier attacks and interception of the Guardians. Even so, number one's left arm was scorched and deformed by a tyrannical mutant that could transform into lava. A large chunk of the armor on its chest was lifted off, exposing the deformed components within. As for the narrow passageway behind it, a layer of burnt ashes had already filled the entire passageway. The ashes slowly rolled along with the flowing lava. Right now, there was a vertical distance of at least 90 meters between number one and the surface of the earth. The roars of the mutants had disappeared, but the violent upheaval of the earth brought about by the volcano and the earthquake still filled this passageway with noise. In the end, it formed muddy rumbling vibrations. Luo Nan handed over the task of analyzing the ambient sounds to the auxiliary computing system. This was to avoid the topographical changes that could cause destructive damage. As for himself, his attention was completely penetrated into the depths of the surrounding dark void. He probed the abyss region. There, a weak incantation was spiraling and circulating. It continued on without end. This was the music that surged as the energy turbulence of the abyss region passed through the special structural form. As the output gradually stabilized, the incantation grew clearer and clearer. It grew louder and louder. In the end, it was simply like a majestic and even fanatical chorus. Blood, blood, blood. Fire, fire, fire. Chapter 599. Number one took 2 more steps forward and suddenly froze. Boom. Flames smashed through the rock wall in front of him, bringing with it a destructive wave of lava heat. In the sudden change of extreme environment, number one's perception and computing functions were thrown into chaos for a moment. The metal body was somewhat stiff and out of control, but Luo Nan's mental senses weren't affected. Instead, they followed the fulcrum that was already stationed in this area and spread out. Then Luo Nan saw the spire-like building topple over on the other side of the collapsed rock wall. It crashed into the roaring and boiling lava, extinguishing in the blink of an eye. It wasn't strange for there to be such a building in the underground lava area. In fact, number one's body had adapted to the extreme environment. It braved the tide-like lava waves and walked to the edge of the collapsed rock wall. Here, the enormous cavern in front of it, as well as the twisted demonic building community within the cavern, only presented a corner of the volcano to number one. There were at least 10 enormous sealed structures scattered randomly in this enormous cavern with the lava as its base color. They were all made of rock and mud. They were of different sizes and were rather crude. They were connected to each other and to the rock walls of the surrounding mountain by pipes made of the same material. They crisscrossed and crisscrossed. One could see that they were building structures with clear functions at a glance. Perhaps it was the reflection of the lava's radiance, or perhaps it was the material or other factors, but these sealed structures radiated a dark red glow. They seemed to be burning at all times like enormous torches. They were very eye-catching. The dark red glow that radiated appeared to be flowing without end upon closer inspection. It was like the blood circulation system of an aberration. It didn't stop for a moment. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the temperature was like fire in this volcanic lava environment. But there were tens of millions of fire god ants in this inferno-like building community. They were following the internal and external passageways, shuttling back and forth at high speed. Luo Nan's mental senses were able to detect that the dozen or so sealed structures exposed above the lava were nearly filled to the brim with fire god ants. More and more ants were advancing one after the other to the far end of the rock wall. They were even advancing deeper into the depths of the lava. That's right. Similar sealed structures and passageways existed widely in other locations of the mountain and the Earth's crust, beneath the unfathomable depths of the high-temperature lava. They were the ant rooms and ant tunnels built by this enormous colony of fire god ants. All of these structures together formed the entirety of the aberration nest. And this was only the lower part of the aberration nest. According to Luo Nan's probing observations over the past few days, This aberration nest included at least 200 ant rooms and 10 times the number of ant tunnels. There was no obvious pattern to their distribution. Some places were denser while others were thinner. Overall, they still formed the shape of an inverted pyramid. About a fifth of the lower portion was completely submerged in magma. And that was Luonan's final destination, the heart of the entire aberration nest, the queen of the fire god ants. It was also the core of the collective consciousness of the entire fire god ant society. The tremors of the mountain and the ground continued. Number 1 stood at the edge of the cliff for 3 to 5 seconds before another ant chamber was peeled off from the cliff. Together with tens of thousands of fire god ants, it fell heavily into the lava. Most ant chambers were connected to the surrounding mountains and strata. The volcanic activity in this area had probably been too intense, resulting in the collapse of the strata that supported it, exposing the ant chambers inside. From this, it could be seen that the ant chambers of the fire god ants were much sturdier than the surrounding rock strata. But these peculiar creations had lost their supporting foundation, and it was very difficult for them to maintain themselves in this vile environment for long periods of time. Such destructive tremors had the effects of natural disasters like volcanoes and earthquakes. There was also the forceful interference of the energy turbulence in the abyss region on the material plane, adding fuel to the flames. There was also the more direct impact from the depths of the lava. Right now, the lava below was surging with waves. There was no pattern to them at all. It was as if a dozen enormous monsters were fighting and struggling within. So much so that the rock walls below continued to crumble and fall, chiseling larger and larger holes. Under these circumstances, it was very difficult for Number 1's auxiliary computing system to accurately monitor and judge the surrounding environment. It was as good as crippled. If it's crippled, then it's crippled. Number 1 had already completed its basic mission by being able to advance to this area. Luonan couldn't count on it to play any role in the future. Luonan soon made a decision. He controlled Number 1 to slide down along the rock wall. He used the most direct method to approach the critical area. The crumbling strata presented a very bad concave shape. There were practically no places for Luonan to borrow strength from. And in this extreme environment, Number 1's not-so-passable basic design exposed problems. Its external rocket propulsion system was intermittent. It simply relied on the electromagnetic shield to roll down like a rubber ball. As for braking and so on, Luonan had to rely on the help of the Aoi combat knife. Such a sorry state completely obliterated the valiant appearance of No. 1 from its sharp knife charge in the previous few hours. Luonan couldn't care less. He controlled Number 1 to slide down another 40 meters or so. The surrounding air was becoming even more viscous. Enormous noises. Noises that originated from the two directions of the material plane and the abyss region's void had already blasted and kneaded together. They radiated a tyrannical psychic pressure that was distorted and chaotic. An invisible whirlpool of turbulence swept up within the Inferno prison. Right now, Luonan could clearly feel the collision and conflict of the two forces within. On one side was the great chorus of blood, 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 fire, fire, fire. It appeared to be fanatical, but in fact, it occupied the dominant position within the abyss region's void. Its energy circulation was extremely strange and miraculous. On the other side was the enormous heat source entrenched in the volcanic strata here. It was in a relatively rough and wild mode of operation, charging back and forth. Although a huge amount of energy was wasted at every moment in this environment, it was almost as if it was replenished at any time, inexhaustible and inexhaustible. Emolun did well. The fire god ants. They really did make the right choice. The conductor of the great chorus was undoubtedly Emolun. This puppet that resided within the Blood Soul Temple only had that tyrannical combat instinct left. Even now he was still able to bring out such a remarkable method of circulation. Even with the powerful enhancement of the Blood Soul Temple, he was worthy of being an expert that was only a step away from transcendence. As for the leading force of the enormous heat source, it was naturally the fire god ant colony. The fire god ant colony's consciousness was quite disciplined. Combined with the enormous ant nest structure that covered the volcanic region, they formed a complete energy circulation and utilization system within an area of nearly 1,000 square kilometers. Even though there were various inefficiencies within, and they were unavoidably restricted by the natural environment, they still possessed inconceivable power due to their enormous base. If they were to contend against the fire god ant head-on, all of the transcendence on Earth, be it physical or mental, would be crushed by the fire god ant. Then there would be nothing for Luonan to do and there would be no plans. All he had to do was pat his ass and get the hell out of here. But today's facts proved that even if one had an overwhelming advantage in strength, one might not necessarily be able to gain the upper hand without the corresponding high-end circulation technique. One might even be able to be used by others. Otherwise, where would the energy Luonan was using to replenish himself come from? Right now, Mo Luan seemed to be piloting a floating power generation platform. He was drifting on the vast ocean. The enormous waves that reached the heavens didn't topple this platform. Instead, they provided powerful tidal energy, helping the platform complete a series of energy transformations. Right now, this transformation mode was still a rootless duckweed, but Luonan believed that it wouldn't be long before there would be a huge change. The progress of the forced infusion transformation is okay. It's just that I'm a bit uncertain when I put the seed in. It really won't do. I'll ask Ruewen to help. Has she finished her class yet? While Luonan was distracted, a heat wave of lava that was several dozen meters tall suddenly surged within the enormous void. It nearly filled the entire void in an instant, swallowing number one whole. The electromagnetic shield was raised to the highest level in an instant. This was the instantaneous limit of Luonan's soul strength when it came to interfering with the material plane. Even the depths of the layers of dark red lava had blue-white lightning tenaciously leaping about. It held on for at least 2 seconds, but in the end it was scattered and shattered. Luonan knew that the instantaneous influx of energy had caused quite a bit of damage to the combat machine. But this was already meaningless. This was because the surging wave of lava had smashed the combat machine into pieces. The faint sounds of the body fragments exploding were drowned out by the enormous background noise of the void. There was no value in saving it. Such a tyrannical attack was the result of the seething evil thoughts of the fire god ant colony. But this wasn't necessarily directed at number one. According to Mo Luan's feedback, this was more like a venting action of the colony after repeated failed attacks. Luonan could see that more than half of the dozen ant chambers within the enormous void had collapsed due to the attack just now. This part of the blood circulation system, which could be considered complete, had a large area of necrosis in the blink of an eye. Harming others and harming oneself. It was nothing more than this. How violent. Luckily, I specially chose a high melting point tantalum alloy. I also did some heat insulation. Number one's head module was still considered complete, as well as half of its chest and shoulder armor. This was the largest wreckage that Luonan's electromagnetic shield could protect. Its body functions had already been completely lost. Its only function now was to protect the metal core in the high-temperature lava, so that it wouldn't be quickly destroyed. Currently, the wreckage of number one's body had completely lost its ability to move. It was slowly sinking in the lava. In the extreme environment of the lava, the interaction between mind and matter was severely limited. Forcefully obtaining a driving force was not desirable, and this was not a good opportunity. So it could only be a mechanical beauty that quietly watched from the sidelines for now. Chapter 600. Wreckage number 1 continued to sink closer and closer to the heart, at the bottom of the lava. It was also the lowest level of the Vulcan ant nest, the area where the ant queen resided. Perhaps it was a coincidence, but the core area of the Vulcan ant nest really did look like an enormous heart. Most of its structure was embedded into the ground. It was completely exposed to the lava and was approximately 20 meters tall. It was undulating due to the intense activity of the ground. It really was like the swelling and contracting of a living heart. Moreover, there were 6 thick pipes, connected to the top. Dark red blood was constantly pouring in and circulating. Although the color of this blood was similar to the lava, it was not to the extent of being confused. This was because the luster of the active flow was hard to be completely concealed even by the layers of lava. Luonan was still thinking about the lava attack that had smashed wreckage number 1 into pieces. The mental sensor network that pervaded the lava focused slightly under his command. It swept from the heart to the inside and outside of the continuously sinking ant room structure. Liquid lava can achieve hammering. This shows that it has a set of controls. But it doesn't seem like it can already carry out consciousness interference with the surrounding environment. There should be a medium. Not only can the Vulcan ant control a living body, it can even control lava. The operating mechanism here seems a bit familiar. Such a marvelous operating mode clearly did not appear in normal data. Luonan soon had an idea. It's in the user's manual. It seems to have been mentioned in the material chapter. The underground lava trembled once more. At first Luonan believed that this was another vent of the Vulcan Ant's collective consciousness. But he soon confirmed that this unforeseen event was not led by the Vulcan Ant's consciousness, but it was inextricably linked to it. Within the twisting vortex of the void of the abyss region and the inferno of lava, a structure of special significance was soaked in the residual energy that overflowed from both sides. It silently molded and grew. It had already taken shape. It broke through the already somewhat weak ground layer with a single tremor. It stuck close to the heart of the Vulcan ant nest, withstood the boiling lava, and rose up. It was a thick and short stone pillar. Even if it stuck its head out, it would only be a meter tall in the end. It was practically insignificant next to the enormous Vulcan ant nest that occupied the entire mountain and several hundred meters of the ground layer. It was like a speck on a person's body. It could be ignored in a matter of seconds. But just as the stone pillar was pulled out, the turbulent vortex that was twisting in the void, causing it to coil and accumulate sediment, suddenly came to a stop. Luonan had yet to come to a conclusion as to what sort of stimulative changes occurred to the collective consciousness of the fire god ants in this instant. But from Luonan's perspective, Luonan felt that Emo Luan was at the helm. The floating power-generating platform drifted up and down within the enormous waves that reached the heavens. Suddenly, an enormous anchor was fiercely stabbed into it. The end of the anchor hit the bottom of the ocean. Although it was shaking violently and even bringing an even more intense blast to the floating platform, it was still deeply embedded into the soil and anchored to the hard seabed. This was not all. At this moment on the platform, another heavy and sturdy pile fell, directly wedged into the depths of the turbulent vortex. 1 pile, 2 piles, 3 piles, 4 piles. At the heart of the Vulcan ant nest, the thick and short stone pillars were pulled up one by one, just like the piles that had fallen. Some of the piles had just probed down when they were wrapped in lava by the berserk consciousness of the fire god ants, smashing them to pieces. But there were also some piles that were either deep or shallow, fixed in place. Then they were pulled up, smashed, wedged in, and smashed again. It was hard to say which one was more tenacious, like this over and over again. But in any case, the floating platform never broke away from the storm vortex. Instead, it was fixed within this domain, forming a deadlock. This was also the most terrifying phase of energy consumption. No matter how marvelous Emo Luan's combat consciousness was, he was just a B-rank puppet. There was a limit to his own energy reserves. It was impossible for him to directly contend against the fire god ants, who occupied the terrain advantage. Therefore he could only rely on his master Luonan's closed system. This was, without a doubt, a collision between the two systems. After the first wave, Luonan was already very strained. In a certain sense, Luonan's soul strength reserves were already the best in the world. This was not only because of the enormous output of his closed system's large production line. It was also because he could ignore the carrying capacity of his fleshly body. He could use the form of the soul cloak to extend and store energy nearly limitlessly. Luonan's current soul cloak could cover the entire world. In addition to the combined reserves of the boundless cloud world, Luonan's stamina was so long that he could practically suppress all the cultivators of the world. Perhaps only the leaders of the 3 great secret orders could rely on their enormous numbers of believers to contend against him. The only thing that could limit Luonan was the carrying capacity of his fleshly body. Though he possessed the boundless ocean, his body's capacity was limited in the end. Even if he were to be sucked dry in an instant, it would be nothing more than the storage capacity of a lake. Not to mention the vibrations and impacts of doing so, just the transformation within was destined to lead to one fault after another. This was extremely dangerous in the tight deadlock process. If the opponent was a genuine extraordinary, Luonan's life would be pretty much handed over when the first fault appeared. The collective consciousness of the Vulcan ant was not this sharp. It was unable to sense Luonan's flaws. But even so, Luonan, who was in the simulator, was like a twisted towel under the frantic and irascible impact of the wrestling. The muscles, tendons, bones, and flesh of his entire body seemed to be about to be squeezed out of it. If this situation were to continue, Luonan would have done his utmost to dig a peerless sinkhole for himself. He could absolutely contend for the top 3 spot on the list of the stupidest people in the 50 years of history of the inner world. Fortunately, this enemy of his did not develop to a qualified and perfect degree, even though it had gathered millions of individuals into a group consciousness. Not only did it not discover the problem that Luo Nan exposed, it even poked an even bigger hole. The group consciousness of the Vulcan ant did not know how to properly utilize its own strength. It also did not understand that this kind of strength would inevitably harm others and itself once it exceeded a certain limit. If it were Luo Nan, he would absolutely not forcefully break through this limit when the instantaneous consumption of soul strength exceeded the limits of what his body could bear under normal circumstances. He would exchange endless future troubles for temporary pleasure. The Vulcan ant did not have this kind of awareness. In its simple mind, using its innate talent to drive the enemy was obviously the most important option. But at this stage, when faced with Mo Luan, who was like a mist of nothingness, and number 1 who had already turned into a pile of mechanical wreckage, the so-called drive ability was of no use. So it could only settle for the next best thing. It used its incomplete side ability to knock down the enemy. It must be said that the upper limit of the Vulcan ant's side ability was extremely high in the environment of the volcanic region. There would practically never be a situation where it was lacking in strength. Under these circumstances, its train of thought was even simpler. If it did not knock down the enemy, then it would need to increase its strength once more until the enemy was smashed into smithereens. With the foundation of reality, this kind of train of thought could not be wrong. But it did not consider one thing. Who would be the first to be destroyed in such a big fight in its own nest? In any case, it won't be me. Luo Nan grimaced in pain. He used the Daoist technique given to him by the gym bishop to relax his muscles and bones, to reduce the damage. At the same time, he was able to capture the turning point of this confrontation within this stalemate. He did not need to wait for the Vulcan ant to smash his nest into smithereens. He only needed to keep an eye on this one-track-minded group consciousness. The instant the two instincts of killing the enemy and self-preservation intersected, creating an even deeper level of chaos. The turning point arrived much faster than Luo Nan imagined. But it happened after all the ant chambers in the enormous cavity above the lava had completely collapsed. The Vulcan ants that fell into the lava were not immediately finished. But every ant chamber and every connecting pipe was the foundation of the Vulcan ant colony. They were an important construction foundation and source of energy for the group consciousness. When large areas of necrosis appeared endlessly and continued to spread, a blockage appeared in the originally complete energy cycle. In the end, hesitation and chaos appeared in this single strand of group consciousness. It was at this moment that the true great enemy, who had crossed realms and hidden here from another time and space, revealed its fangs to the Vulcan ant colony. The instant of hesitation and chaos expanded into a destructive storm in the blink of an eye. The Wraith sign exploded from above the polar domain like a bomb filled with poison. It smashed into the structure of the group consciousness that the Vulcan ant colony had formed with great difficulty. Luo Nan knew better than the vast majority of people in this world just how strict the requirements of a structure were for a group consciousness that had a clear direction. The group consciousness of the Vulcan ant society was able to become neutral from the chaotic and illusory mental turbid flow with great difficulty. A small portion of it probed into the abyssal region and was able to integrate its power from a higher level. But because of the Wraith sign's deadly bombardment, the structure collapsed and the foundation was corroded. This caused the edifice of group consciousness, which originally possessed a certain order, to collapse and fall apart in an instant. It must be said that as long as there was a nest and a strict social structure of the Vulcan ant, it was not difficult to reconstruct the group consciousness. Since the beginning of time, the Vulcan ant colony in the volcanic area had been penetrated 5 times by powerful people from all walks of life. Each time it was a great crisis that nearly overturned the entire colony. Even the queen ant was captured. The most recent time was 6 or 7 years ago. And this didn't include the aftermath of the world-shaking battle with priceless gold. But within these short few years, the Vulcan ant colony had developed to its current scale. They were still the number 1 or 2 hegemons of this volcanic area. The tenacity of the Vulcan ant colony was worthy of admiration. But the problem was that the Wraith sign was the poison bomb that had instantly destroyed the core structure of the Vulcan ant society. This Darksider species was currently using its inconceivable talent to pour its toxic spores into the ruins of the core structure. The spores began to proliferate rapidly. The Vulcan ant began by controlling other living creatures. And this time they had encountered a true expert in this field. Chapter 601. The opportunity came earlier than expected. After the Wraith sign blew up the structure of the group consciousness of the Vulcan ants, it naturally activated the corresponding mechanisms to stop damage and repair. As mentioned before, as long as the Vulcan ant aberration nest was present, the material foundation and structure were present, it was not difficult to reconstruct the group consciousness. The Vulcan ant society had used 5 or 6 successful examples to prove this point. According to the relevant information from research on the Vulcan ants, when the Vulcan ant society suffered a fatal attack, usually when the queen was killed or captured or when the aberration nest was severely damaged, causing the group consciousness to collapse and the ants to be leaderless, this highly social aberration colony would activate its extreme survival mode. They would use the relatively intact area as an axis on the wreckage of the nest to combine the ant chambers and ant tunnels that could be linked together. They would radiate the relevant pheromones to gather the greatest number of defeated soldiers. After gathering to a certain scale, they would use a special aberration path to stimulate and nurture a temporary queen ant. They would reconstruct the group consciousness in a short amount of time. With this as the foundation, they would rapidly replace each other and regroup. If there was no area of this scale, a single ant chamber could complete this task. It was just that the group consciousness produced would be of an extremely low level. The various ant chambers would gradually integrate and slowly converge. However, this would be accompanied by conflict and slaughter. It would inevitably end with the death of the temporary queen ant of the losing side. The process would be extremely tragic. It was this extreme survival mode and its matching ability to rapidly replace each other that helped the Vulcan ant society to tenaciously survive in this volcanic region for several decades. But it was also because such a pattern had appeared too early in today's special circumstances. The Wraith sign's poison bombs struck from above, crushing the group consciousness of the Vulcan ant society from the mental plane. This attack didn't cause much damage to the Vulcan ant nest, but it sent the hypertoxic spores into every corner of the Vulcan ant society. Luo Nan still did not understand the Wraith sign's keen and brutal instincts. He did not know how it was constructed. But every time this fellow hunted, it would accurately tear apart the vital parts of the target. This time was no exception. The hypertoxic spores did not possess any direct destructive power, but when they spread out, the fire god ants that were moving through the various ant rooms and ant tunnels suddenly fell into chaos in their neat and orderly formation. It was as if they had lost their sense of direction. The front and back of the formation were disjointed. Some of them accelerated forward while others turned back. Some of them even clashed together, interfering with each other as they circled in confusion. Interference pheromone. Luo Nan roughly guessed an answer. Ants and the like were social insects. Their behavior patterns were largely guided by pheromones. Though the Vulcan ant was a mutant species, it still retained a few similar patterns. Due to the Vulcan ants receiving erratic information, the large circulation system with the heart of the nest as the center was already in disorder. However, upon closer inspection, there were some general patterns that could be followed. Millions and tens of millions of fire god ants were clearly gathering towards the nearest ant room. Every ant chamber was a center and there were no exceptions. Thus, in a short span of a dozen seconds, the aberrated nest had hundreds and thousands of centers. They had even begun to cut off the circulation channels and retract the flowing energy, entering a de facto state of separation. This is really hee-hee. For the fire god ants that had been torn apart, no, they had not done anything wrong. The instincts engraved in their genes were displaying their effects. After the leading group consciousness collapsed, they quickly entered an extreme survival mode. The environment they felt and the stimuli they received indicated that the overall structure of the aberrated nest no longer existed. They had to use the remaining ant chambers as the center to gather the greatest amount of power and reconstruct the group consciousness. Then they would be constantly replaced and walk the path of expansion once more. So they did this and they did it quite well. The crisis pheromone formed after the ant assembly was violently volatile. It was injected into the ant chambers through a special method, erasing the suppressive pheromone from when the Vulcan ant queen was alive. This caused a portion of the worker ants inside to undergo aberrations. At the same time they killed each other. The final victor became the temporary queen ant. They erected a rough new framework and began to construct a low-level group consciousness. During this period of time, the Vulcan ant nest had the beauty of a single spark setting a prairie ablaze. Within Luo Nan's mental sensing network, there were weak soul flames lighting up one after another. From a few to a few dozen to over 100. They quickly formed a scale. The amount of resources that the Vulcan ants could utilize in the environment of the volcanic area should not be doubted. Although these low-level group consciousnesses were far from being as powerful as the previous one, the imprint engraved in their genes still gave them the natural ability to absorb external heat and life energy. According to normal survival mode, these low-level group consciousnesses would have a period of solitude to further familiarize themselves with and apply this ability. When they began to expand once more, they should be experts in this field. They would capture thousands upon thousands of living creatures of other races during the expansion process. They would serve as food and slaves. Then they would rely on the advantage of expansion to defeat their own species that no longer belonged to the same aberrated evolutionary path. They would unify the volcanic area once more and let their genes follow an even stronger path of development and inheritance. But there was a problem. At this stage, every ant chamber was very close to each other. They were close to each other to the point where they would be face to face the moment they stepped out of the door. According to the genetic instincts of the Vulcan ants, they did not have any kinship or brotherly respect when faced with this kind of situation. The only choice was fight. The internal war of the Vulcan ants erupted 15 seconds after the formation of the first low-level group consciousnesses. They entered into an all-out war mode 5 minutes later. For a time, the entire core area of the Vulcan ant nest was filled with the flames of war. And the effects of the collapse of the original group consciousnesses were still continuing to spread. If there was a problem at the headquarters, then the branch divisions would not have an easy time. It was unknown when the unrest in the entire volcanic area would come to an end. Speaking of which, the entire Vulcan ant society had suddenly entered the spring and autumn warring states period mode. It wasn't that no one wanted to do their best to save it. Originally, the only core of the aberrated nest was located in the heart beneath the lava. The highest ruler of the entire Vulcan ant society, or perhaps a queen, had to be added. Well, in short, the true Vulcan ant queen was extremely angry and irritable at this moment. The Vulcan ant queen was probably a mutant among mutants. It had an extremely deformed body. The front half of its body was only 4 or 5 centimeters long. It was around 5 times the size of a normal Vulcan ant. But below its abdomen, it was rapidly expanding in an unimaginable manner. Its diameter alone was 10 centimeters, about the width of an adult's clenched fist. As for its length, it was about the length of an entire arm behind it. This structure was a little similar to the termite queen. Many researchers suspected that the original species before the mutation was a termite. But no termite queen would have this kind of mass and strength. The completely unbalanced body proportions made it look more like a super large eggplant with a handle. At this moment, this eggplant was squirming slightly. A dirty light like pus and blood filled the entire space of the heart. It reflected the countless fertilized eggs and non-fertilized eggs piled neatly on the 4 walls, as well as the rather neat ranks of worker ants and soldier ants. Even further out, there were layers of blood-red fluff, spread out, like layers upon layers of terraced crops, neatly arranged. It became an inseparable part of the internal structure of the heart. At this moment, the Vulcan ant queen had just recovered from the shock of losing control of her kingdom. In the entire Vulcan ant society, the Vulcan ant queen was definitely the one closest to possessing a complete individual consciousness. In fact, it was the core of the Vulcan ants' collective consciousness. This was its most important function in this colony other than reproduction. It could be said that the collective consciousness of the entire Vulcan ant society was determined by the mutation talent and growth of the queen. This queen was still very young. It had only been about 2 years since she became the ruler of this kingdom. This caused it to be far from developing a mature consciousness system, making it even harder for it to make accurate and clear judgments. This limitation caused the collapse of the collective consciousness of the Vulcan ant when the two systems collided. It also caused it to be unable to analyze the crux of the problem after losing control of the kingdom. Instead, it was quickly driven by an even more stubborn instinct. The great enemy that descended from the sky was thrown to the back of its mind. What it needed to do now was to consolidate its resources and strength, using a more advantageous structure among a bunch of low-level consciousnesses to reclaim its kingdom and become the ruler of this world once again. In the spring and autumn warring states period, it undoubtedly had an overwhelming advantage. But the current scenario was alien invasion. The former queen and the future overlord were not given any chances. A bloody beam of light tore through the barrier between the mental and material planes, directly piercing into the heart region. This was an artillery attack from the direction of the polar domain. Ever since Luonan was tossed around by the dimensional crossbow, he had taken a liking to this sort of tyrannical and fierce offensive method that came from the polar domain. Right now he no longer had the tyrannical collective consciousness of the Vulcan ants. There was Emo Luan in the void of the abyssal region. There was the seed imprint in the depths of the lava. The Wraith sign itself had long since transcended space and boundaries. All kinds of interference had disappeared, and there were two positions of reference at the same time. There was absolutely no reason for the attack to miss the mark. The bloody beam of light silently drowned the area where the Vulcan ant queen was. A similar hue flooded the entire ant room. At this moment, inside the heart, countless zygotes and unzygotes, the dense troop of soldier ants and the eggplant queen, which was supposed to be the toughest, were all twisted and destroyed in the intense ripples of light. Chapter 602. In this era, the night in any city was no different. The only thing that could be distinguished was the food habits accumulated over a long period of time. After moving from Xia City to Tea City for 2 months, Inla still hadn't gotten used to the completely different tastes. She returned to Xia City this time. The food she had grown accustomed to in her early years gave her a unique feeling when it collided with her taste buds. But tonight Inla didn't eat. This was a habit she had developed with Mrs. Halder. Lady Halder had maintained this habit for more than 10 years. The last time she had a meal was before she had beheaded her husband. But Frau Halder did not mind a glass of red wine before bed. Thus Inla pushed the dining cart and knocked on Mrs. Halder's door. Mrs. Halder had just finished her bath and was sitting on a round armchair by the window. Her bathrobe covered her pale skin, revealing only her calves and bare feet. The most conspicuous thing was that on her right cheek, there was a long and slender bloodstain that had a strange curvature. At this moment, it was emitting a dark red light. This was not a description. This bloodstain was proof that she had passed the ultimate test of the blood flame will. In itself, it had a rather mystical effect. Boss. Inla used the old way of addressing Mrs. Halder. Then, just like when she was a secretary back then, she poured the red wine into a glass and let Mrs. Halder take it. Lady Halder picked up the thin stem of the glass and raised it to her eyes, staring at the red wine swirling within. At this moment, Lady Halder was like a melancholy and lonely lady, although her heart was surging with iron and fire. Inla sat to the side, wondering if she should start a conversation. At this moment Lady Halder took the initiative to speak, her voice low. Our investor refused to meet. Inla didn't find it strange at all. She had guessed it when she left Xia City last time. However, she had always been curious as to who the investor that Lady Halder had mentioned was. This wasn't some inconceivable person who had taught Madame Halder the secret art of herding the Darksider species in order to reconstruct the sacrificial artifact. In the entirety of Xia City, there were only a handful of people who had the qualifications to do this. Even if it wasn't limited to Xia City, how many more people could there be? Lady Halder swirled the wine, her eyes unfocused. Is it to prevent losses or are they happy to see it happen? That is the question. Right now Madame Halder seemed to be in low spirits. The more it was like this, the harder it was for Inlu to speak. She stared at the cup in her hand in a daze. Fortunately, this atmosphere didn't last for too long. Very quickly, Lady Halder's voice regained its usual calmness and decisiveness. The investment is only an external force. The wavering of the church's foundation is what's fatal. You are now the only deputy officiator, so you must focus your efforts on the ritual. Although Rin Hong is a rebel, he is better at this than you are. Even Rin Hong, that dead man, was compared. Inlu naturally understood their attitude and replied solemnly, I will remember. Lady Halder cut to the chase. What about the target? The target has entered the abyss area again, but there won't be any offensive and defensive drills tonight or for the next 2 or 3 days. I heard that Teacher Luo is in seclusion. Luo Nan isn't here. He's basically just looking at the scenery in the abyssal region. But who can say that in a few months, a few weeks or even a few days there won't be new functions? Indeed. Lu added before she hesitated briefly before she asked. Boss, the blood will ring in us, I mean. Lu didn't continue. Lady Halder looked at her former secretary through her wine glass. The sparkling and translucent walls of the glass caused the two's faces to clearly distort. As the glass spun, it transformed into all sorts of strange shapes. Communication between people was often like this. It was precisely because they knew that people were all the more cautious. Lady Halder understood Li's thoughts. She also understood her apprehensions. At this time it was the superior who spoke the truth. This represented honesty and trust, so she hooked the corner of her lips. You want to ask if the structure of the blood will ring and the fundamental ritual of the order, the Blood Soul Temple, belong to the same category? Let's put it this way. The word configuration that Luo Nan spoke of can be used to generalize the blood will ring and the Blood Soul Temple. From an academic perspective, they should both belong to the same class of configuration. Lu let out a secret sigh of relief and hurriedly responded, That's why we monitor the corresponding target for reference. Lady Halder interrupted her words. But before the 14th, I once believed that the solidification of configurations in the abyssal region belonged only to extraordinaries and the order. Li's expression darkened slightly. Before the 14th there weren't many ability users in this world who could enter the attack and defense of the abyssal region, but there were still quite a few. Mental side users of B rank and above had several years of research and they should have no problem doing so. However, the average B rank mental side user would only be able to stay in the abyssal region for a few seconds to a few minutes before they would be struck down by the turbulent flow of energy. There were a few who were more powerful, and they could temporarily forge special structures to turn resistance into power. They could seize a short opportunity to attack and kill. Only those who reached the level of extraordinaries, especially the mental side extraordinaries, could solidify this structure, the configuration that Luonan spoke of, within the energy flow of the abyssal region. It was like a car or a boat, like a house or a city. It could truly utilize and control the inexhaustible energy of the abyssal region. It could be adjusted and modified a step further, gradually increasing its power. Aside from extraordinaries, the only ones who could accomplish this before the 14th were the various orders, the ones who could transform the hearts of the people into their own. Actually, not everyone in the various secret orders had this ability. They had to have extraordinaries overseeing the abyssal region in the early years. They were able to solidify the configuration of the abyssal region, then transform it into a foundation. They were able to link their believers' desires, beliefs, and so on. Then they used this to divide the level of authority, allowing one person's technique to be used by 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 people. The origins and details of these techniques were the secrets of the various orders. Every orders had their own specialties and taboos, and they were hidden behind a dense fog of mystery. Only someone like Lu, who was a core member of the upper echelons of the orders, who was part of the orders of ideals like the Blood Flame Order, was able to learn and understand its essence. Lu originally believed that this would be the core secret and reliance that she would guard within her heart. But she never expected that the blood intent ring would appear out of nowhere and bump into this highest domain. It even brought several hundred people to tour around. Up until now, no one had connected this matter with the fundamental rules of the various orders. But how long could this last? Both inside and outside were in turmoil. What could she do? Mrs. Halder saw through Li's thoughts. She lowered her head slightly, indicating for Lu to come over. Lu was a bit startled, but she still got up and walked over to her former boss's side. At this distance, in this atmosphere, she subconsciously did what she did in the past. She curled up her body and bent her legs. She sat on the carpet and leaned against Mrs. Halder's knee. She was like an admiring child, but she was even more like an obedient kitten. Her choice was very correct. Chapter 603. Ever since she had become the vice officiant, Lu had entered the Abyss region more than once, entering the Blood Soul Temple, towering amidst the chaotic turbulence. Every time she felt as if she was riding a small boat out to sea, boarding a platform amidst a violent storm. The stability of the platform was naturally much greater than that of a small boat, giving her a great sense of security. However, the impact of the storm and turbulence was always present. Lu felt that the Blood Soul Temple was a platform on the sea, but she had no idea what it looked like in the eyes of others. That was because in the Order's system, the Blood Soul Temple had countless sides. In the eyes of every believer, there were subtle similarities and differences, but they could never see the whole picture. As a priest, how could she not be the same? As the vice officiant, Yinlu could understand the basic framework of the Blood Soul Temple and control a portion of the details. She used a secret technique to purify the believer's will, using it as a primer to mobilize the power of the Abyss region. This allowed her, with her C+ rank strength, to compete with B rank experts. The position of vice officiant had raised Yinlu's level, but she had always felt that this wasn't a good job. This was especially true after Ren Hong's rebellion. After she had taken over the Order's daily operations, she had to sort out and guide the willpower of thousands of believers every day for the past 2 months. Furthermore, due to the instability of the believer base during this period of time, there were all sorts of troubles and slip-ups. Even with Lady Halder taking care of it, it still took up most of her energy. Sometimes Yinlu even thought, Ren Hong's rebellion. Could it be that he's tired of this matter? Lady Halder seemed to have the ability to see through people's minds. She communicated with her thoughts. Mastering the sacrificial method and managing the Blood Soul Temple have always been the most difficult tasks. You have foresight and decisiveness, and you also have the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. However, you lack the tenacity to put in the effort. These things aren't the most suitable for you. Yinlu hurriedly expressed, I will definitely focus on my thoughts. Lady Halder disagreed. Such a personality isn't something that can be easily fixed. Not to mention even I have had a hard time sorting through these past few years. Constantly immersed in this chaotic power of faith, it will only be more difficult to maintain one's own thoughts. Yinlu once again thought of Ren Hong. Madame Halder's thoughts seeped in like icy water, layer by layer. In the end, it's because of the lack of sacrificial artifacts. The sacrificial vessel can be manipulated, suppressed, and adjusted. At the same time, it is also a set of rules. Our various operations can be used as a reference to see if they are in line with the fundamental laws. I just don't know if we have led the church on the right path in the past few years. Boss. Madame Halder's thoughts continued unabated. Without the sacrificial artifact, we can only wait until every year's grand ceremony. But this year, Yinlu finally understood why Mrs. Halder's mood was so low. Because today, December 21st, was the day of the Blood Flame Order's establishment memorial ceremony. This time of the year was the busiest and most important time for the church. But this year, today and tonight were undoubtedly the most chaotic and desolate. Since the officiator and deputy officiator were not present, Jiang Yuanzhen could only take over the ceremony in D City. As for the ceremony in Xia City, they had spent half a year preparing for it, so they simply threw it aside. Yinlu once believed that Madame Halder would return to Xia City at this time to give an explanation to the believers of Xia City. She never imagined that she would die without a cause. She stayed within the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss district. She could feel the will of the believers wither and waver. Yinlu wasn't even willing to understand it any further. She just wanted to clean up the mess tomorrow morning. Madame Halder clearly had a different way of thinking from Yinlu. She sent a strand of her thoughts straight to the lowest level, where the withering and wavering was the most intense. Yinlu was helpless. She could only follow. Soon she arrived at the structure of the Blood Soul Temple, where the stone forest and magma lake were. Originally, this was the structural region where the believer's will was cleansed and purified. The powerful structure of the Blood Soul Temple condensed a powerful internal pressure to form a lake of magma. The muddy willpower of the believers continued to be tempered until it reached a certain degree. Only then could they go to a higher level. But now the internal force was loose. There was no heat. There was only restlessness and chaos. It was like a mosquito flying in disorder. The willpower of some devout believers even fell down. They were affected and gradually showed signs of stripping away. Faced with such a situation, Yinlu felt that idling around was a sin. She subconsciously took action to control it. Fortunately, the basic structure of the Blood Soul Temple was still stable. The first ablatum had indeed left behind a stable foundation for the order. Madame Halder didn't move. She only watched Yinlu and asked, "Are we at the edge of the abyss now?" "No, boss, no." Yinlu might lack the willpower to do her best, but her foresight and judgment had always been praised. She didn't think that there was a problem with Madame Halder's will. She only saw the current situation as a test. As she dealt with the loss of the believer's faith, she solemnly replied, "It's just as you said. At the bottom of the abyss of fear and despair, the mighty blood flame will is watching us." The blood flame order's teachings had always been extremely violent. On one hand, it made it very difficult for them to expand. On the other hand, it made it have a relatively solid core of believers. Moreover, the more adversity they faced, the more they were able to display their resolute nature of the teachings. Last time, when the blood flame order was on the verge of collapse, it was precisely this extremely resolute nature that gave birth to Madame Halder. She used her husband's head to prolong the order's life and rebirth. Now perhaps it was her turn. Bang bang bang. A strange sound suddenly came from a certain part of the bottom structure. Yin Li's heart skipped a beat. Her smooth control suddenly became sluggish. She didn't even have time to search for the source of the problem before the continuous bang bang sound spread throughout the stone forest and magma lake area. In response to it, the turbulent storm outside suddenly became intense. The Blood Soul Temple, the platform on the sea, began to sway, causing one's mind to be in chaos. At this moment, the destructive storm of the abyss seemed like it could cut through at any time. In Yin Li's perception, the basic framework of the Blood Soul Temple was clearly distorted. It was on the verge of collapsing and breaking. Yin Li didn't know what to do, and Madame Halder didn't give her any instructions. Just like that, her consciousness stiffened as she spent a nightmarish period of time in the bang 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 sound. When she came back to her senses, her consciousness had already returned to the plane of reality. It was most likely that Madame Halder had brought her back. The light in the room was warm and gentle, but Yin Li's heart was filled with coldness. Her memories of the abyss were somewhat hazy, but she still remembered that the structure of the Blood Soul Temple had already undergone some kind of irreversible change after the continuous distortion. Yin Li turned her head, wanting to ask what had just happened. When she turned her head, her cheek rubbed against Madame Halder's body. Because she was kneeling, she rubbed against a leg that was exposed outside the bathrobe. It was slender and tight, but it was so cold that it didn't have the warmth of a living person. Halder didn't seem to feel anything. He just expressionlessly raised his glass and drank the red wine. But Yin Li clearly sensed a faint layer of blood mixed in the wine's fragrance. "Boss." Yin Li was bewildered. She wanted to get up, but her head hurt slightly as Halder pressed down on it. Madame Halder looked down from above, her gaze cold and heavy. When she looked into Yin Li's eyes, it was like an icy storm had blown, wreaking havoc in her heart. "Do you feel it?" "The sacrificial artifact, the Blood Soul Temple." "Boss, someone has made the sacrificial artifact, the Blood Soul Temple, and they're even modifying the framework." Yin Li's eyes went wide. Bang. The empty wine glass shattered, and the shattered glass fragments scattered over Madame Halder's bathrobe and leg. Some of it even streaked across Yin Li's cheek. But at this time Yin Li didn't even dare to blink. On Madame Halder's right cheek, there was a long and narrow blood stain. It seemed as if blood was really going to flow out. Aside from that, her entire face was pale and transparent. There was a callous and crazy tension to it. She calmly gazed at the base of the glass. It was as if a new cup could grow out from the base at any time, or perhaps it could grow into an unknown shape. The unknown was the greatest fear. The members of the Blood Flame Order never avoided fear. They firmly believed that the blood flame was hidden deep within fear, giving them strength. But when their foundation was controlled by someone else, would the blood flame still protect them? Half a minute later, Madame Halder spoke with a surprisingly calm tone. "Notify multifaceted. In an hour, I want all the video data of Xia City's central train station and its surroundings on the 14th. The range can extend to 30 square kilometers. Also, no matter what method she uses, no matter what price she wants us to pay, I need an opportunity to directly make contact with Luo Nan. Alone, without interference." Yin Li was a bit stunned. "Luo Nan?" Madame Halder pursed her lips. "Luo Nan." The first and vice ablatums of the Blood Flame Order repeated the name Luo Nan back and forth. Several dozen kilometers away, in the 6th underground floor of Gear, Luo Nan clenched his fists within the simulation pod. "It's done." His main consciousness was still 2,000 kilometers away in the volcanic region. Just a minute ago, when the polar domain cannon had annihilated the queen ant, a solid foundation had been erected. These were the thick and short stone pillars that had popped out earlier. They rose up one by one and firmly wedged themselves into the heart of the mutated nest. In a short few dozen seconds, the thick and short stone pillars had formed a scale in the heart of the Vulcan ant nest. They towered like a forest. Together they constructed a primitive and rough foundation of an altar, allowing the illusory blood-soul temple to break through the boundary between the mental and the material. It also tore apart the defensive fortress of the Vulcan ant society and forcefully colonized it. It was a formal struggle for control over this enormous energy cycle system. The interior of the Vulcan ant nest's heart had already been flooded by the light and shadow of the Blood-Soul Temple. It was remodeled, and beneath it, within the area encircled by the stone forest, a depression of magma that was clearly denser than the surroundings appeared in its embryonic form. The boiling magma within was no longer something that was purely on the material plane. Instead, it was mixed with an even more astonishing amount of heat and gas. It was like a pot of boiling oil. It constantly splashed outwards, but it did not exceed the range of the stone forest's control. Chapter 604. For the Blood-Soul Temple, the bottom layer of the stone forest lava lake was a methane pool that absorbed and transformed the impurities of the outside world. It was also the cornerstone of the entire configuration. When the cornerstone was set, the nature of the entire configuration system became clear. Luonan finally found a foundation on the material plane for this structure that drifted on the mental plane of nothingness. Luonan wasn't sure if the Blood Flame Order's method mentioned this step, but he saw a similar suggestion from the user manual of the virtual brain system. From Luonan's perspective, it went without saying which side was more important. There was also the coincidental ecological and geographical environment of this volcanic area. There was also the urgent need for resources for the next step of the plan. Only then was there an operation. It hadn't even been a week since the start of the operation. Aside from feeling a bit frustrated with the design of the battle machinery, the overall operation was quite smooth. Especially the success of the current critical segment in one fell swoop. This made the impatience and hesitation in Luonan's heart vanish into thin air. He was in a good mood, but the fire god ant's mutated nest was already clogged and impassable. When the Blood-Soul Temple's stone forest lava lake took shape, it was as if a deadly malignant tumor had grown within the fire god ant nest's energy circulation system. It continuously extracted the surrounding heat energy and the life energy of the fire god ant colony, transforming them into nutrients needed by the Blood-Soul Temple. The efficiency of this transformation wasn't particularly high for the time being because the Blood-Soul Temple needed to adapt to the environment and constantly adjust. But it was still a level higher than the fire god ant's crude energy circulation instincts. In addition, the fire god ant colony had entered the warring states period. Each ant room was divided and fought to the death. The group consciousness had yet to be reconstructed, and the originally smooth energy circulation system had become particularly rigid. There was practically no effective way to fight for the stone forest lava lake. More importantly, the formation of the stone forest lava lake represented the foundation of the Blood-Soul Temple's structure. In essence, it achieved isolation from the fire god ant nest. And since it didn't possess the aura of a living being, the group of fire god ants with low intelligence just assumed that it was a new structure formed from the compression and deformation of the volcano during an earthquake. Currently, the fire god ants used a single ant room as a base for internal strife. Their need for resources wasn't too urgent, so they didn't experience the problem of a single blocked node. At most, they weren't used to such an eyesore, but they didn't have any plans to attack, occupy, or transform it for the time being. They just let the stone forest lava lake suck their blood. This was the classic example of making a fortune in silence. Before the new fire god ant queen appears, there will most likely be peace for a period of time. This amount of time is still not enough. If the error in the calculation is not too big, I will need at least another 50 hours or so to complete the second and third levels, and have a certain offensive and defensive ability. If there's a design problem, we'll have to delay it. Luonan's relaxed mood was not maintained for long. He was pressuring himself right now, flipping through his notes in the simulation chamber. His brain was spinning a bit faster than when he had slaughtered his way in. Not only can I not be quiet during this period of time, I can't let the Vulcan ants in the other ant rooms be quiet either. Interference, destruction, annexation. Not a single one can be left out. Oh, large-scale destruction is out of the question. Every resource is precious right now. Hey, why does it look like an RTS game? But RTS should not include the design of the base and building core. As he ridiculed himself, Luo Nan continued to overcome his terrible translation obstacles. He operated the virtual brain system, performing half-baked simulations and calculations on the Blood Soul Temple that was being constructed. The Blood Soul Temple was a kind of configuration. Though it was complex to the point of making one's eyes pop out, and many elements of witchcraft and mystic arts were mixed in, its various layers of structure were pieced together. Even the thought process that appeared within was a relatively typical configuration rule and thought process. Even if the level of each structure was uneven, there were countless dazzling flashes of brilliance, but there were also low-level mistakes that were unbearable to look at. While Luo Nan didn't have the qualifications to question the abilities of the first ablatum of the Blood Flame Order from his experience in the inner world. But the virtual brain system and its user manual possessed the ability to research and judge. That is, if this wasn't an absurd scam set up by his old man. Luo Nan had already confirmed through this period of learning and understanding that the virtual brain system hidden within the external neuron's main function was to serve the creation of the dynamo core and the spirit core. It was more inclined towards practical manufacturing techniques. It didn't have much knowledge regarding configuration design. It was just like how a decorator might not be good at interior design. But the configuration examples within the user manual and the series of configuration design data stored within the virtual brain system were all the most typical, the most characteristic, and the most standard cases. Luo Nan used these cases as a reference to understand the most stringent criteria for judging configurations. What was a qualified configuration, how to discover flaws in a configuration, where problems were easy to occur in complex configurations, and how to make adjustments during concrete production and so on. These were all extremely valuable parts of the virtual brain system and its accompanying user manual. After many days of reading and learning, Luo Nan's horizons had been greatly broadened from a newbie who didn't understand a thing. At the very least, he possessed the most basic aesthetic ability in this field. Now he had entered the stage of learning how to walk under the support of the system. There was a proper term for this stage. It was called having high expectations but low ability. Looking at countless cases, Luo Nan felt that his chest was beautiful, but when he truly got down to it, it was a long story. It's time to move the seed imprint over. Luo Nan gave an order to Mo Luan, who was hiding in the depths of the void. Mo Luan's current soul body of black smoke had already reached the acme of concealment as a pure energy construct. He quietly extracted the wreckage of the electromagnetic Vanguard 1 from the depths of the lava without alarming the Vulcan ant colony. Under Luo Nan's instructions, Mo Luan tore away the useless parts of the wreckage, leaving only the head module intact. The virtual brain system drove the divine binding hoop module to realize a self-inspection interface refresh. Right now, the head armor played the role of a protective shell. According to the results of the self-inspection, the outer tantalum alloy armor was perfectly preserved. Luo Nan was relieved as he ordered Mo Luan to place the helmet into the lake of lava in the forest of stone lava. After the helmet entered the lake, it floated in the center of the lake of lava, rolling endlessly. Right now, the color of the boiling lava in the area of the lake of lava in the forest of stone lava was quite distinct from other areas. The color inside grew brighter and brighter. It gradually turned from dark red to bright red, orange, golden yellow, and finally suffused with white light. Dark veins of blood seeped through the interior. This meant that the temperature of the lake of lava was rising. Basically, the temperature of the lava exposed to the air was 1,300 degrees at most. But under high pressure and other special environments, it was a different story. For example, right now, the divine binding hoop's self-inspection interface instantly sent back the temperature information of 1,700 degrees. This was due to the special configuration of the Blood Soul Temple. After absorbing Luo Nan's soul strength and many other layers of energy, it had an interference effect on the plane of reality. In such an environment, the harassment and infiltration of the Vulcan ants could be avoided. The seed imprint could also learn how to efficiently absorb and utilize energy. It could gradually mold and restore the powerful structure and instincts that originated from the golden tree. Luo Nan went to look at the data of the helmet armor. The research and development of the tantalum alloy was originally for the purpose of probing the surface of the sun. It could withstand a high temperature of over 5,000 degrees. This military material had to take into account more performance indicators. There were some trade-offs. The current upper limit of the helmet's heat resistance was approximately 4,000 degrees. The upper limit of the heat insulation was 2,000 degrees. It was absolutely safe. The magnetic energy core inside would not be destroyed. But the problem was that complete heat insulation was not right. Why is the magma lake only 1,700 degrees? Luonan smacked his head with his notebook. As mentioned before, Luonan did not find any basis for the true structure of the Blood Soul Temple from the Blood Flame Order. He completely relied on the virtual brain system and the user manual. He gradually estimated the input data and used its simulation calculation function to re-estimate the design. The virtual brain system was very powerful, but Luonan was a complete armchair strategist. The specifics would depend on the actual situation. Looking at the temperature of the core of the magma lake, there was still a problem. The energy needed to restore the golden tree seed imprint to its peak state was undoubtedly astronomical. At the same time, there must be an efficient mode to control this astronomical amount of energy. Both were indispensable. Luonan had painstakingly built the forward base and assembled Electromagnetic Vanguard 1. He had gone in a large circle to bring it over. He had squeezed out and revived its combat instincts to the greatest degree. He had cultivated it externally and strengthened it internally in preparation for its rapid growth. For this reason, he followed the basic design of the Blood Soul Temple to simulate and improve a set of gradual absorption and utilization of energy. The front was fine, but there was a problem with the absorption and utilization of heat energy. The efficiency had to be cut by at least half. Could it be that the interference strength isn't enough? But if I were to increase it further, the thermal efficiency coefficient would be too ugly. In the end, I still haven't broken through the critical point. Luonan had to admit that there was still a problem with his design. He had the calculation formula, the system simulator, and all sorts of cases to refer to, but he still couldn't do it well. This was a bit shameful. There was nothing he could do even if it was shameful. Right now, he could only verify and calculate anew to see if there were any problems with the modified configuration design from before. This made the work even more complicated. It was even more difficult than attacking the fire god ant nest. Luonan calculated until the sky was dark and the earth was dark under the double blockade of the calculation formula and the structure. He was completely unaware of the passage of time. Perhaps he slept in the middle, or perhaps he didn't. In any case, he was muddle-headed. His mind suddenly stirred, and a moment later the alarm of the simulator rang. Someone came in. It was Ruiwen. Luonan slapped the notebook against his head. He decided to go out and get some fresh air. When the simulator opened, he saw a little girl carrying a food container that was over half a meter tall. She was waiting outside. Oh my, thanks. Luonan first revealed a smile. Then he came to a realization. Didn't you say that I don't need to deliver food? Breakfast. Ruiwen responded simply. Oh, it's morning already? Luonan looked at his watch. It was already 8:30 in the morning on the 22nd. Countless formulas and basic structures spun before Luonan's eyes. Comparatively speaking, the feeling of his stomach was more real, especially after he saw the half-meter-tall multi-layered food container. He was really hungry. Chapter 605. Just come over. There are a lot of people up there. Oh, the Mystic Arts Research Society has begun to arrange a theme for this week. This wasn't the main point. Luonan understood that Ruiwen was saying that there were a lot of people in gear right now, so she had traveled through space without going through the security system's inspection. The little girl certainly had this ability, but how did the food box and the food inside come together? He removed the lid. It was quite sturdy. Then there was the breakfast inside. Porridge, side dishes, and sliced beef. This was his favorite combination, and the amount was sufficient. But thinking about how they were mixed and vibrated in the void, then categorized and reorganized. This seemed to have already exceeded the limits of Luonan's thinking. Luonan gave up on thinking deeply under Ruiwen's gaze. In any case, he had never really figured out Ruiwen's mysterious gift. Breakfast and whatnot, as long as it could fill his stomach, it was fine. If he really put in a piece of wood or porcelain or something, with his 9 apertures and 6 roots technique to strengthen his internal organs, his life would not be in danger. After confirming that Ruiwen had already eaten, Luonan began to sweep through the food box. But he hadn't eaten 2 bites when the God Binding Hoop's real-time tracking detection reported abnormal information. and the simulation results of the virtual brain system still differed from the ideal value. Luo Nan subconsciously opened the design blueprint and looked at the critical points that the system criticized as missing. He scratched his ears and cheeks and tried to make some changes, but he nearly caused the disastrous consequences of collapsing. He was scared to the point of breaking out in a cold sweat, but he was even more unwilling. He simply straightened out the design from the beginning and then he plunged headfirst into it, unable to pull himself out. He came back to his senses once more because the light shone onto Rui Wen's body when he expanded the area of the projection work area. Right now the little girl was hugging her knees as she sat in the corner. She was in a daze silently, and the tidy food box was placed next to her. She had already done her utmost to avoid interference, but the projection light instantly expanded outward. She couldn't react in time. Luo Nan froze and stopped writing. "You didn't go back? Today is the weekend, right? Auntie and Mo, you didn't drag you out to go shopping?" "I told you. I was with you. I told Auntie." Luo Nan's self-service translation was on point, but he sweated a bit. Rui Wen's explanation clearly conflicted with his reason for taking a day off. She was certainly allowed because Mrs. Luo Shuqing had her eyes closed. He looked at his watch and was shocked to find that it was already past 10. The little girl had been huddled in the corner for half the morning without a word. Luo Nan let out a sigh. He felt that he owed her quite a bit, but he was a bit delighted in his heart. Clearly Rui Wen was closer to him. Oh, this was even more unfair to her. He made up his mind, closed his notebook and temporarily cleared his mind of calculations and simulated configurations. He pondered on how to take Rui Wen out to play and relax. But where? Just as he was hesitating, Rui Wen's eyes focused. "Is it very difficult to calculate?" Luo Nan was a bit embarrassed, but he still honestly admitted, "It really is quite difficult. Although we have the simulation system and the configuration module, there are too many other systems in the Blood Soul Temple. It's fine on the spiritual level, but when it comes to the material level, we have to replace them one by one and even reorganize them. This is too much, and it's not easy to take care of everything." Luo Nan had a belly full of bitterness from the recent mental challenge. He opened his mouth and couldn't hold it back. He said a bunch of things in a muffled voice. Only after a while did he realize that something was wrong. He saw Rui Wen's earnest but not necessarily clear eyes, and he slapped himself in the face. He was quite a good-for-nothing. He had poured a pile of emotional garbage onto the little girl. Luo Nan hurriedly stopped. "Cough. It's just a minor detail. Don't mind it." Rui Wen continued to stare at him. "What's the main point? Oh my, she even knows how to ask a question." Luo Nan was a bit surprised. He pondered for a moment before answering seriously. "The main goal is purification. Purification of the cloud world." He opened his mouth and his emotions came back. He began to gesture. "The cloud world. I told you about it, right? It's the place where that big monkey came from." Rui Wen looked as if she understood, but she didn't. Luo Nan knew that it would be very troublesome to explain in detail. Oh, it just so happened that he needed to accompany Rui Wen. Chatting and exchanging would count, right? "Wait a moment for me. Flag bearer." Luo Nan prepared to go all out. He awakened the military AI of the laboratory and searched the database for materials, organizing them. A few minutes later, Luo Nan turned off most of the laboratory's lighting. He adjusted the projector and entered playback mode. The pitch-black space became the best background, revealing a gorgeous starry sky. Under Luo Nan's control, the projection screen gradually enlarged and focused. More and more details appeared in this starry sky, from the Milky Way to the Orion Arm to the Gould Belt to the local bubble to the interstellar cloud all the way to the solar system and Earth. Every time Luo Nan looked at this set of star material, he would have the marvelous feeling of being insignificant and jumping about. This was even more so after he received the external neuron. His mind became more and more subtly blurred as he let his mind wander. His mind wandered. However, Rui Wen was also lost in thought. It looked like she was very interested in this set of star atlases. Perhaps this little girl would become an astronomer in the future? All right, this was also his imagination. It was paternalistic. Luo Nan calmed his mind. After the irregular blue sphere of water, the Earth, occupied the central position, he picked up his digital pen and drew a few dotted lines on the edge of the sphere. Under the effect of the simulation engine, a blurry section of two bubbles, colliding and warping was formed. At the other end of the section, Luo Nen used a gentle brush technique to outline smooth lines. It was like a dense weave of flowing clouds spreading out layer by layer. This is the cloud world. Right now it is colliding and making contact with the space and time we are in. This is the marvelous space and time anchored by our mother. Yes, our mother anchored this place. This is a place that I must explore and protect. Luo Nan looked at Rui Wen's focused gaze as he spoke to this point. He was a bit embarrassed. Instilling this sort of emotional thing into a child didn't seem too appropriate. He organized his train of thought and directly led to the main topic. Right now in the cloud world there are two enemies of mine. It's probably because of my mistake that they managed to break in. One of them is extremely powerful and extremely hard to deal with. He wanted to plot against me before. And I don't want him to ruin my mother's work. So I want to get rid of him. Hold on, it seems like this direction isn't too good. But Luo Nan thought about Jin Tong, who died by Rui Wen's hand. He chanted an Amitabha and braced himself to continue speaking. He had been monitoring Gong Qi and Snake Tongue for a very long time through the soul cloak. He understood some details that he wasn't too clear about before. For example, Gong Qi wanted to get rid of him through the veil of silence. Or the complicated relationship between Snake Tongue and Gong Qi. After straightening things out, he explained the cause and effect to Rui Wen. His reasoning was quite clear. At the very least he felt that Rui Wen should understand him. Rui Wen did understand. She gazed at the sketch of the cloud world drawn by Luo Nan and asked softly, "Is that person more powerful than Jin Tong?" Luo Nan thought for a moment and said, "You can't compare it like this. Jin Tong is on the fleshly side while Gong Qi is on the mental side. Before we got rid of Jin Tong, Her Majesty Empress Wu had already beaten him to a pulp. A huge flaw was revealed in his mental state. That's why you and the Wraith sign attacked him from the inside and outside, taking his life in an instant. Although Gong Qi's soul and fleshly body have been forcibly separated, he still retains the majority of his abilities. He has maintained quite a bit of patience these past few months. Even if he loses his balance for a moment, he will be able to quickly adjust. As for us, it's impossible for us to find someone like Her Majesty Empress Wu with combat strength. After all, I don't want the secret of the cloud world to be known by outsiders." Rui Wen didn't speak anymore. This meant that she understood everything. Luo Nan began to rotate the blue ball of water in the projection area after clarifying his goal. This projection image was actually a holographic model of the Earth from the military's database. Aside from the optical imaging satellite, it also involved many confidential basic surveying and mapping data. Its precision and accuracy were worthy of trust. If Luo Nan wanted to, he could completely focus this holographic projection onto any region of the globe. The average resolution could reach around 5 millimeters and there wouldn't be too much distortion. Right now, his destination was a certain volcanic archipelago in the Pacific Ocean. It was the Chan City region where the headquarters of the Ability User Society was located. If we want to make a move against Gong Qi, we must first place our focus here. This is the place where Gong Qi's fleshly body is stored. This is the place. Right now, the terrain displayed is undesirable. Headquarters should have done something to it, but they never imagined that our Luo family's formatting theory combined with the condensation ring would have such an astonishing effect. Luo Nan spoke loftily. He had already entered a state of complete immersion. He pointed at the topographic map of the volcanic archipelago and spoke without end. These words had been bottled up in his heart for far too long. He never had the chance to pour them out. Even if it was impossible for Rui Wen to give him any advice, she was undoubtedly a qualified listener. To a speaker, that focused and earnest gaze was simply an incomparable enjoyment. My plan is to first use the Wraith Sign's Polar Domain Blood Soul Cannon, just like Luo Yuan's Dimensional Crossbow. I'll instantly break through the defenses and directly eliminate Gong Qi's fleshly body. I'll seize the energy of his fleshly body. Then I'll take advantage of the attack against Gong Qi and the maturing Jin Tong puppet to immediately return to Shi Yunduan and surround him with all my might. If everything goes smoothly, then we'll have an extraordinary level meat shield like Jin Tong. We'll have Yuan X and Mo Luan to interfere. We can basically recreate the scene when we killed Jin Tong. In the end, Rui Wen, you'll be the one to make the final decision. Of course, these are just plans on paper. We might need to make adjustments when we actually carry them out. Rui Wen listened attentively and even asked, "Practice is preparation?" Luonan knew that Ruiwen was talking about the offensive and defensive practice of the Blood Intent Ring in the Abyss region these past few days. This was the operation he was proud of. Yeah. Ghost Eye is also a mental type extraordinary. His fleshly body is in the open sea. The practice in Xia City is all on the mental plane. It's quite similar to Gong Qi's situation. Ruiwen nodded in understanding. I will work hard. Chapter 606. Seeing Ruiwen's super serious appearance, Luonan couldn't help but rub her head. The little girl's hair had just grown to around 10 centimeters. It was a bit manly, but it was soft to the touch. It was as if there was nothing there. It matched her slender figure quite well. She had the appearance of a girl worthy of protection. Oh, protection. This thought came suddenly, but it reminded Luonan once again. Even if Ruiwen's talent was unparalleled, she was at most 13 or 14 years old. Her mental age would only be younger. This sort of matter shouldn't involve her. Needless to say, the link she was involved in was critical and dangerous. Instantly deciding life and death with an extraordinary. How many people in this world could do this? The more he thought, the more ashamed Luonan felt in his heart. He subconsciously held the back of Ruiwen's neck lightly, making the little girl lean a bit closer. He spoke very seriously. Ruiwen, remember this. All you need to do is repeat that attack against Jin Tong. I will do my utmost to prepare everything else. We need to make sure that nothing goes wrong before we execute the final step. Otherwise, even the tiniest flaw will be pushed back. There's no need for us to take risks with that old bastard Gong Qi. We're still young. We can forcefully outlast him to death. We just need to be able to do this before he unravels the secrets of the cloud world. Luonan's words were more like a frame for himself when he spoke to the end. He could already feel it, but the growing emotions in his heart pushed him to complete this promise. Ruiwen was a bit stupefied by Luonan's long string of words. Her eyes looked over in a daze. Luonan also felt that his words were a bit too heavy. He hurriedly changed the direction and method of the topic. He chatted about some of the links and measures in his plan. There's a lot of work to be done on the details to complete the plan. Take the Wraith Signs cannon in the polar domain for example. It's not easy to blow up the fleshly body of an extraordinary, even if it's just a psychic. I've looked up the relevant information. Actually, there really isn't much difference between extraordinary in terms of fleshly body strength. There are even some psychic extraordinary who don't have the requirements of flexibility, toughness, and reaction. They can operate their fleshly body into a fortress. In terms of pure defensive power, they are even more exaggerated than some fleshly bodies. Therefore, this shell must possess a certain amount of strength. It must have the ability to instantly penetrate and destroy Gong Qi's fleshly body. I chose Jin Tong's seed imprint because I valued its potential. It could instantly absorb Gong Qi's physical energy to strengthen itself. If everything went smoothly, it could also be used to kill Gong Qi. Of course, it wasn't strong enough at the moment. All I wanted to do was to charge it up to at least B+. It would be even better if it could reach A+. However, the energy needed for the conversion process was astronomical. At first I was hunting in the cloud world. The life energy of the mushed-mouth ape was very pure. It was a pity that the seed imprint's instincts were not dug deep enough, and he could not control it, wasting a lot. Furthermore, the more I hunt, the bigger the commotion will be. Gong Qi is extremely sensitive over there and I'm worried about being discovered, so I can only replenish on Earth. Now I'm here. Luonan rotated the virtual Earth to return to the Eurasian continent from the Pacific Ocean. He locked onto the volcanic region 2,000 kilometers away. It's here. This place has a closer connection to the cloud world. It's suitable to build a tunnel to deliver resources and equipment. That's why we chose this place. As for the suitable environment, that was a pleasant surprise. Luonan enlarged the projected image as he spoke, letting Ruiwen see even more details. This included not only the topography of the volcanic region, but also the relationship between the map of the cloud world and this region. Do you see? I didn't just randomly scribble. This region is actually the intersection point of the cloud world and the spacetime collision contact of Earth. I have discovered 2 such intersection points on Earth. One is here and the other is the region of Xia City where we are located. It's not Gear. It's 300 to 400 kilometers outside the city. Gear's situation is a bit special. It is the core gear that my mother constructed. Its purpose is to act as a fulcrum to anchor the clouds across space. It's not the same thing as a space-time collision. Oh, maybe it has a bit of an impact? Luo Nen really didn't dare to make a conclusion. Why did the Cloud World and Xia City have such a fate? Perhaps gear could be considered an explanation? He was stunned for a moment, but he finally remembered that Rui Wen was still listening to his explanation. He coughed and went back on track. In short, the Cloud World is currently leaving the volcanic region. Xia City is gradually approaching. Given the clear crustal activity in the volcanic region and the recent earthquake in Xia City, I suspect that it is closely related to this sort of space-time collision contact. Having said this, Luo Nan was worried that Rui Wen might not be able to understand if he spoke too deeply. He asked, "Do you understand? Don't you find it boring?" Rui Wen didn't respond. She just stared at the projected image. Her eyes didn't even blink. It was great to have an audience like this. Luo Nan was satisfied to see Rui Wen's attitude, regardless of whether she understood or not. Of course, he did his best to make things more interesting. It's right here. The location I'm pointing at is 1,000 meters underground. I discovered a fire god ant nest. It has a unique social ecosystem and the surrounding environment of lava. It is extremely helpful for the conversion and utilization of energy. I've even set up the Blood Soul Temple there. It's the one that just tormented people. It was originally just a structure on the mental plane. I personally modified and designed the structure in order to realize it on the real plane. Unfortunately, there are many problems right now. The most annoying ones are the internal pressure and temperature. Luo Nan talked about the design of the lava lake in the stone forest. Even though he was singing a one-man show from beginning to end, as long as he had Rui Wen's focused gaze, he would be in high spirits. He was still not satisfied after he finished talking about the lava lake. Luo Nan chatted with Rui Wen about the special environment of the volcanic area. The fire god ant nest is probably the most complex structure that can be constructed out of all the known mutants. The height of its core area is equivalent to a 200 to 300-story skyscraper. Each branch structure controls an area with a radius of over 100 kilometers. Within this area, it can also control other mutants to serve it. It is the overlord of the volcanic area in name and in reality. I've read related papers. It should be through the hormones it secretes that it reacts with a certain parasitic fungus in the volcanic area. The resulting compound acts as a medium to realize this function. If it weren't for the fact that their collective consciousness hasn't developed over the years and that they have a fatal weakness in energy control, Spring City would probably have to migrate. You don't know how dangerous it was when I controlled the electromagnetic Vanguard one to kill my way through. I was lucky enough to discover a fissure created by an earthquake in time, bypassing the most difficult 10 kilometers. Otherwise, I might not have been able to kill my way to the center of the nest when you came this morning. Luo Nan spoke excitedly. He used his sketching ability to draw a corresponding sketch in the projection work area. Unfortunately, it wasn't as detailed as the virtual Earth model. He could only make do with looking at it. If everything goes smoothly, the second and third floors of the Blood Soul Temple will be constructed in another 50 to 70 hours. I will attempt to cultivate the collective consciousness of the fire god ants and place them within the Blood Soul Temple. With the help of the Wraith sign, there should be a way. If I really succeed, then I can attempt to control the entire fire god ant colony. When the time comes, this volcanic area will become a kingdom under my control. Luo Nan spoke with great vigor, but he felt that the meaning of the joke was a bit thicker. Conquering an ant society. When the time comes, I can say that I'm the king of the fire god ants. Cough. This name is more like that, but don't laugh at me. When the time comes, you'll be the fire god ant princess. Rui Wen didn't laugh. She just stared at him with her pitch-black eyes. Luo Nan was truly embarrassed. He hurriedly denied himself. Forget it, forget it. The cloud world is more suitable for us. Over there the clouds cover the sky. You can't see the end. Countless secrets are hidden there. Wait until we smoothly eliminate the opening of the palace and purify that place. Then I can say that I'm the king of the clouds. And what about you? The princess of the clouds, okay? He told a clumsy joke, but Rui Wen seemed to like it a lot. Her gaze was a bit vacant. It was as if her gaze pierced through the multicolored projection, pierced through the earth and the sky, and pointed 2,000 kilometers away. It also pointed behind the barrier of space and time. The meaning in her eyes was perhaps longing. This sort of Rui Wen was far too rare. It was to the extent that Luo Nan instantly understood this mood. He blurted out a few words. "Do you want to go?" Rui Wen suddenly turned her head. She didn't speak, but her eyes lit up. Luo Nan had a headache the moment the words left his mouth. But when he saw Rui Wen's dazzling eyes in an instant, his impulsiveness and headache transformed into formal consideration. His brain spun at lightning speed and his thoughts directly transformed into words. He didn't bother with embellishment. The fire god ant nest is too dangerous. There's no place to stay for now. It's not suitable for you to go. However, we can first go to the cloud world. Rui Wen stared at him, the glow in her eyes growing brighter and brighter. Actually, it's quite difficult for me to go to the cloud world by myself. I'm talking about going by myself. It's quite difficult for me to go there by myself because I can't fly. I'll just be like a rock. I'll keep falling down. But you can. The more Luo Nan spoke, the more he felt that it was reliable. With your ability to merge body and soul, as long as you have my support, it's not much different from truly flying. There's absolutely no problem for a short period of time. Do you want to go? It seemed that Rui Wen had already forgotten to speak. She just stared at Luo Nan's face. First she blinked her eyes. Only when she saw that Luo Nan still had a smiling face did she subtly lower her head. She waited for Luo Nan to confirm that the words that came out of Luo Nan's mouth would not change. She finally increased the scope of her movements and nodded forcefully. At the same time, a smile spread across both sides of her cheeks, completely softening the contours of the muscles and bones of her face. Not a single bit was held back. In this instant, what Luo Nan saw was the purest expression of emotions he had ever seen in his life. She was like a pure and innocent infant, and there was an additional touch of moving color. Chapter 607. The astral winds whistled and the clouds surged. Occasionally, a shower of ice crystals would blow past, reflecting the firelight that seeped through the gaps between the clouds. It was dazzling and possessed destructive power. Luo Nan felt quite marvelous as he watched the ice crystal shards penetrate his body. Recently he mostly used the soul cloak to observe the cloud world from afar, monitoring the whereabouts of Gongqi and Snake Tongue. Firstly, it was convenient. Secondly, it was safe. Today his soul entered the out-of-body state, and he especially interfered with the clouds to form a half-real, half-incorporeal water vapor humanoid. He felt a bit of novelty when he first used it. If he was like this, then there was no need to mention Rui Wen, who entered for the first time. The little girl's figure flickered back and forth between the clouds, appearing and disappearing erratically. She was still adapting to the feeling of flying through the air. Occasionally Luo Nan would need to interfere with the void to lend her strength. However, seeing her more and more agile and free performance, it seemed that flying unhindered through the clouds and leaving no traces behind wouldn't be an obstacle that was difficult to surpass in the near future. Thinking too much is useless. Being in a good mood is truly good. Luo Nan took care of Rui Wen as he split a bit of his attention to lock onto two targets several thousand kilometers away. Right now Gongqi and Snake Tongue were together. They seemed to be studying a mushed-mouth ape. This was a living body that they had caught with great difficulty. Controlling it was quite troublesome. Snake Tongue was a B-rank curse mage. She didn't possess an overwhelming advantage when compared to the mushed-mouth ape. She was tossed around quite a bit when she was alone in the cloud world. Hee hee. Luo Nan sneered. Rui Wen suddenly hovered in the air at this time, coming to a steady stop by his side. The structure of her body and soul formed an intense resonant relationship with the surrounding clouds of the void. It caused Luo Nan's water vapor humanoid form to distort a bit, but it soon began to decrease in magnitude. It was even more restrained and restrained. 10 seconds later, it was nearly impossible to detect unless one deliberately probed. Huh. You can fly now? I'm still trying. Rui Wen gave a simple answer. Her slender figure undulated a bit as she enunciated her words. 2 seconds later she stabilized. Do your best. Luo Nan could only express this way when faced with Rui Wen's talent. Next, Luo Nan took advantage of Rui Wen's time to adapt to her new technique to begin his work as a commentator. He shared the scene of his perception through a closed system. It's these two, our targets. As they spoke, Snake Tongue attempted to hypnotize and control the captured mushed-mouth ape with Gongqi's help. However, what awaited her was yet another failure. This wasn't the first time a similar situation had occurred. This made Luo Nan deeply feel that the day he caught the Wraith sign would be the day his luck attribute would go off the charts. Luo Nan gave Rui Wen an explanation of what Gong Qiqi and Snake Tongue were currently doing. In the end, he even went into a deeper analysis. Actually, Gong Qiqi opening this project and giving Snake Tongue the opportunity to control the mushed-mouth ape might not be out of good intentions. He needs to find something for Snake Tongue to do. Remember? I said that these two people's situations are different. Both of them are trapped, but Snake Tongue has been misled by Gong Qiqi. She believes that Gong Qiqi can come and go at any time. She was fine before, but after being trapped in the clouds for 2 months, Snake Tongue's patience is about to run out. What replaced it is suspicion. If Gong Qiqi can't bring out something new, we might be able to see them turn on each other. Actually, Luo Nan had thought of using this matter to make a fuss. However, after some consideration, he felt that this wasn't his domain of expertise. Playing schemes with Gong Qi and Snake Tongue might alert the enemy and make things worse, so he didn't delve too deeply into it. Right now he was paying more attention to the technical segment. There were many problems he needed to solve if he wanted to kill Gong Qiqi. This fellow Gong Qiqi has the ability to teleport his soul body. I once saw him leap 2,000 kilometers in one go. He's extremely powerful. If we can't succeed in our first attack, he will very likely escape. Of course, we aren't bad either. But if the ambush turns into a chase, the variables will be too great. Rui Wen floated to the side and expressed once more, I will do my best. No. This segment is mainly testing me. It's the problem of my control precision. Luo Nan didn't want Rui Wen to add more pressure to herself. And it was just as he said. If he wanted to do a good job in the ambush, then he needed to completely play out all of his resource cards in the shortest amount of time possible. Moreover, he needed to accurately hit Gong Qiqi's old face. Precision was the most crucial and direct requirement. It was even more important and more difficult than the strength of the artillery shell. The artillery strike that destroyed Gong Qiqi's fleshly body in Chan City needed to be closely synchronized with the assault in the cloud world. The Jin Tong seed imprint needed to accurately hit Gong Qiqi's fleshly body, which was under the layers of protection of headquarters. It needed to accurately grasp the time to seize the energy of Gong Qiqi's fleshly body. Then it would accurately jump back to the clouds and join the ranks of those who surrounded and killed Gong Qiqi. Any mistake in any segment would cause unexpected problems to crop up and produce variables. To put it bluntly, Luo Nan's plan wasn't perfect. Its tolerance for error was far too low. The possibility of interference was far too high. It was far too easy to lose control. But this was the only opportunity he could think of. It was also the only way to squeeze out all of Gong Qiqi's strength. Luo Nan's heart was apprehensive, but he had no way of telling this feeling to anyone. Luckily he had Rui Wen. He had the best listener in the world. Right now, I can only use the observation and positioning of the large coordinate system to carry out the interference effect. Did I say the large coordinate system before? Well, this is the name I came up with. I just comprehended it not too long ago. It can be considered my extraordinary domain, even though I'm not an extraordinary. It's using me as the origin and the body and soul order frame as the core law. I embed my own law within the interference area. Right now, my soul cloak has already covered nearly the entire Earth. Even though I can't receive all information at the same time, if I focus my mind, I can pour my attention to any point in the coverage area at any time. Once I realize it, I can do it. It looks very simple, right? But it's super difficult to actually do it. Luo Nan met Rui Wen's gaze and subconsciously extended his hand. He drew a draft diagram of spacetime interference amidst the surging clouds. There are times when human strength is limited. It doesn't matter which side of spacetime it is, the unchanging laws of physics still hold the absolute dominant position. I'm not the creator. I have no way of fighting against the structure of spacetime. If I want to temporarily distort the laws of physics in the relevant area, I must satisfy many conditions on top of the foundation of a powerful energy output. Every missing condition will cause the energy output to increase exponentially until it exceeds the limits of my ability. Over. Chapter 608. With the number of extraordinaries and their reactions over at Chan City. Even if the polar domain cannon succeeds in seizing the energy from Gong Qi's fleshly body, it will still be very difficult to drag the Jin Tong puppet back to the clouds and precisely place it next to Gong Qi. Luo Nan drew circles on the Tan City region as he spoke. Soon the sketch was completely unrecognizable. He felt that he had lost his composure a bit. He shook his head and turned his face to see Rui Wen's particularly serious expression. Even a little girl doesn't look favorably upon me? Actually, the pressure in Luo Nan's heart had been dispelled quite a bit with the narration just now. He actually laughed when he saw Rui Wen's appearance. He extended his hand to stroke the little girl's head. Rui Wen's hair was fine, smooth and soft. It was like silk and muslin. Even though Luo Nan was in an out-of-body state, interfering with the water vapor of the void to take human form, the sensation of her hair was still wonderful. Don't be nervous. Have a bit of confidence in me, okay? Luo Nan didn't want Rui Wen to worry, so he changed the topic. Don't look at how difficult the matter is. It's not impossible. Otherwise, why would I be single-mindedly thinking about smashing my head against the wall? Rui Wen raised her head slightly, allowing the half-real, half-incorporeal hand of water vapor to brush through her hair. Her eyes were still staring at Luo Nan, not blinking at all. Luo Nan felt that he should demonstrate his strength. He erased the sketches floating in the clouds and drew a new set of images. It was a 3D image of a seemingly ordinary gear. Using this as a foundation, he sketched out the lines and rendered the background. In the time of a few breaths, he had drawn a very familiar architectural scene in the cloud world. Oh, this is the North Coast gear. Our mother's masterpiece. Do you remember what I said? It doesn't belong to the intersection point between the cloud world and our local space-time. But I'm connecting to the cloud world here. The precision of control is the highest when compared to the volcanic region and the wilderness of Xia City. Luo Nan drew the intersection point between the cloud world and local spacetime. He gave the other two intersection points disproportionate marks for illustration. Then he asked, knowing the answer. Why is it like this? Gear is the fulcrum that anchors the cloud. Rui Wen really did answer. She was basically repeating Luo Nan's original words. But she was able to extract these words from Luo Nan's large number of explanations in the first instance. It was enough to show that she was listening very seriously. Luo Nan's heart felt warm. He couldn't help but laugh out loud twice. He reached out his hand again and stroked Rui Wen's soft hair. His heart unconsciously rose quite a bit. That's right, gear is the fulcrum that anchors the clouds. How can it do this? That's because our mother used the method of coupling, using herself as the central axis and her own order framework to drive the environmental forces of the surrounding area layer by layer, forming a formless and moving gear set for her use. The surrounding area doesn't just include Xia City, it even includes the space and time of the cloud world. With our mother's ingenious means, the cloud world and the local spacetime opened up a spatial tunnel, creating a special structure that connected the two spacetimes. Luo Nan endlessly drew details on the cloud sketch. He also poured out the results of his research during this time. Normally, gear on the North Bank is just an ordinary building. It doesn't have a direct connection with the cloud world. The structure that runs through space and time is fractured. The most crucial link has been extracted. But if we have our Luo family's formatting theory to activate the telescope in the atrium of gear, then we have the external neuron in our hands as a special key. The structure that runs through space and time can be reconnected and reconstructed, recreating this miracle. What do you think? Isn't it awesome? Rui Wen gazed at the constantly perfecting sketch and slowly nodded. Luo Nan grinned. His appearance was a bit odd on the water vapor humanoid, but this wasn't the main point. Right now he spoke excitedly once more. Gear on the North Bank is the best reference for me to increase my precision. You must know that our mother wasn't an ability user. At the very least, she wasn't an especially powerful ability user. She didn't possess an extraordinary domain. She was unable to impose her own laws and rules on the two sides of space and time. But in the end, she was still able to successfully construct the inconceivable spatial tunnel. Moreover, it was still able to maintain its operation many years later. This is, without a doubt, the result of her coupling theory. She used a tiny basic gear to drive a complex structure and an astonishing number of gears. She used a crowbar to pry up the entire earth. Driven by his emotions, Luo Nan's water vapor humanoid fluctuated a bit. His pen moved even faster. He drew out a few results from observing gear, observing the cloud world and observing the structure of the spatial tunnel. He already had a certain result. Of course, it couldn't be considered particularly perfect, especially in the aspect of models. Whether it was geometric structure or algebraic structure, he still didn't have a completely self-consistent result. I'm currently searching for a suitable mathematical tool in the virtual brain system. Fine, I admit that this kind of result is a century or two ahead of the times. There should be a few other fulcrums. It won't be easy to thoroughly research it, but it doesn't matter. I can still imitate and reproduce it. If it really doesn't work, I can just copy gear to the other side of the Pacific Ocean. Luo Nan hadn't completely sorted out his later thoughts, so he didn't go into detail. Right now he was just doing this to pacify Rui Wen's emotions. He didn't forget that he brought Rui Wen to the clouds today to rest and play. Talking about too many serious topics was meaningless, right? At this time, several thousand kilometers away, the two monitoring targets also made some movements. The experiment of controlling the mushed-mouth ape had yet to make any progress, so they began to roam and search once more. They probed the structure of space and time in the cloud world, accumulating data and information for their escape. Gongqi has the ability to teleport. His scouting range is large. We need to maintain a certain distance from him. Oh, but there's no need to worry too much. We'll definitely take the initiative. Luo Nan was prepared to take Rui Wen for a stroll in the cloud world. Though this place was extremely monotonous, it was still a bit interesting to see the churning clouds, the flames rushing to the skies and the mushed-mouth ape flying back and forth. There was a mushed-mouth ape approaching at high speed from over 700 kilometers away. This strange demon of the cloud world had the ability to fly untraceable. It just happened to be what Rui Wen needed. And he had always felt that the attack methods of this demon were a bit like muddling the body and soul. It was similar to Rui Wen's miraculous talent. He just happened to bring this little girl over for reference. Let's go consult the mushed-mouth ape's methods. Luo Nan confirmed the target and shared his perspective with Rui Wen. He explained in passing, that mushed-mouth ape. Isn't it bigger than Yuan X? Actually, Yuan X was like this before. I just tried to move its two arms into local space and time, and my soul strength was nearly sucked dry. Rui Wen,